The Porsche screamed once as the crusher grabbed it, and I saw something no scrap car should hide. I was 30 feet away, knee-deep in twisted fenders and cold steel, when the silver shell rolled forward on the conveyor. The salvage yard always sounded hungry at that hour. Hydraulics groaned. Chains rattled. A forklift beeped somewhere behind me. The air carried burnt oil, wet rust, and that bitter metallic dust that settled on your tongue if you worked too long without a mask. I almost looked away. Almost. Because on most mornings, a wreck was just a wreck. Another insurance write-off. Another rich person mistake. Another thing I could strip for parts before the scales decided what it was worth. I had 2 kids at home, a mortgage 3 months behind, and a stack of medical bills from my son's asthma treatments tucked under the visor of my truck because I couldn't bear to leave them on the kitchen table anymore. I did not have room in my life for curiosity. Then the sunlight hit the torn rear quarter panel, and I saw it. Not damage, not wiring, not ordinary engine hardware shoved where it did not belong. A polished casing, custom mount points, carbon weave where scrap metal should have been jagged and cheap. It flashed for half a second through a rip in the body before the crusher arm jerked the Porsche forward another foot. I dropped the impact wrench so fast it smacked the concrete. Stop the line, I shouted. Nobody moved. The compressor kept thumping. The belt kept whining. Luis, who ran the forklift on Tuesdays, lifted one hand without turning his head, like maybe I was yelling about a loose tire again. Stop the line. I yelled louder, already running. The gravel slid under my boots. I cut between a stack of doors and a bin full of radiators, slammed my palm against the red emergency kill switch, and the whole yard gave one violent shudder before falling into a hard, ringing silence. That silence costs money in a place like mine. Every man in earshot turned. The Porsche hung crooked in the crusher's claw, half lifted, its undercarriage exposed. Oil dripped in dark beads onto the concrete. The front end was caved in badly enough to make most buyers walk past it without a second glance. But the rear compartment had been modified by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Not backyard work. Not amateur work. Precision. Money. Intent. I climbed the platform and wedged myself beside the car before anyone could restart the line. Ethan, Luis called, finally paying attention now that production had stopped. What are you doing? Saving us from destroying something worth more than this whole row. A couple of the guys laughed at that. Fair enough. I would have laughed too if I had not seen the venting system tucked behind the shielding plate and the clean, impossible shine of a hand-built assembly hidden inside a junked Porsche sold for scrap. I wiped grime off the housing with my glove. There was no serial tag where one should have been. That made my pulse change. Because regular engines announce themselves, they want to be known. Performance work leaves signatures too, even when it is illegal. This thing had been scrubbed clean, mounted deep, and hidden on purpose. Whoever built it had not wanted a mechanic to find it. And whoever sold the car had no idea what had still been inside. Or they had been desperate enough not to check. I leaned lower, tracing the edge of the casing with 2 fingers. Cold metal. Fine machining. A seam line too exact for salvage yard improvisation. Then I saw the insignia, small, almost invisible under the grease. Not a brand. Not exactly. A Halston Dynamics prototype mark. My stomach tightened. Everybody in the county knew that name. Halston Dynamics made headlines, bought politicians, sponsored hospitals, and bulldozed smaller companies without leaving fingerprints. Claire Halston's face was on business magazines in every grocery checkout lane within 50 miles. Billionaire. CEO. Untouchable. Morning light slid through the cracked skylight in thin white bars, turning dust into floating ash above the salvage bay. The old fluorescent tube near the office door buzzed like a trapped insect. Burnt oil, cold steel, and wet cardboard hung in the air. On the engine stand, wrapped in grime and silence, sat the thing that could change everything. Ethan Walker did not touch it right away. He stood there with a shop rag in one hand and stared at that tiny prototype insignia, as if looking too long might wake trouble that had not noticed him yet. Outside, a tow chain clanged. Somewhere near the fence, one of his children laughed, then coughed in the morning chill. Real life. Rent life. Lunch packing life. The kind of life that had no use for secrets worth $8 million. But secrets had a way of choosing their own address. He rolled the Porsche engine under a brighter lamp and cleaned one corner with careful fingers. Not a production stamp. Not aftermarket, either. The metal had been machined differently. Lighter in one place, reinforced in another, built for performance no scrapyard should ever see. Quiet genius hidden inside a car sold like trash. His jaw tightened. If this belonged to Halston Dynamics, then Claire Halston had either thrown away something priceless or never knew what had been buried inside her own car. Those were two very different kinds of danger. A pickup rumbled into the yard. Tires crushed gravel. A door slammed. Dress shoes stepped where work boots usually did. That alone felt wrong. Two men crossed the yard in dark jackets, city clean and stiff around the shoulders. They were not board members, not mechanics, not neighbors. Just hired pressure in polished leather belts. The taller one gave the office a quick scan, then the stripped Porsche shell, then the engine hoist. "We're here about the vehicle from yesterday's auction." Ethan said nothing for a beat. Silence could be dignity when used well. Then he folded the rag once and answered, "You got paperwork?" The shorter man smiled without warmth. "We're offering cash instead." That changed the air. Not a legal problem. A moral one. A man only waved cash that early when truth was trying to outrun paper. Ethan walked past them, lifted the auction folder from the desk, and set it flat beneath the light. Bill of sale. Lot number. Transfer stamp. Plain, ugly proof. He tapped it once. "I bought scrap," he said. "If you want scrap back, you can go through the same office I did." The taller man's voice hardened. "You don't understand what you have." "No," Ethan said quietly. "I think I do." Outside, the wind pushed rain against the tin siding. The whole shop seemed to listen. The shorter man reached into his coat and laid a thick envelope on the desk. Cash. More money than Ethan usually saw at one time. Enough to cover overdue bills. Enough to fix the transmission on the truck. Enough to let his children stop hearing him whisper over bank statements at night. "Take it," the man said. "Today." Ethan looked at the envelope, then at the engine, then at the family photo tucked into the corner of the office mirror, bent at one edge, fingerprints on the glass. Need is loud. Character must be quieter. He pushed the envelope back across the desk. "If Claire Halston wants something from my yard," he said, "Claire Halston can ask for it herself." The taller man leaned in. "That's not how this works." Ethan did not flinch. "It is here." No shouting. No threats from his side. Just stillness. That was what made them angry. The shorter man snatched the envelope, and the taller one gave the engine a long look that lasted half a second too long. Calculation. Fear. Urgency. Then both men turned and left without another word. But that silence was not defeat. It was a warning. 10 minutes later, the county auction office called. A woman with a nervous voice asked whether there had been any confusion about the Porsche sale. The fluorescent tube outside the executive suite buzzed like a trapped fly, thin and irritating, the kind of sound that kept guilt awake. I remember the first time I stepped into Claire Halston's world because everything in it seemed polished enough to hide rot. Frosted glass, steel trim, burnt espresso in the air. 5 Halston Dynamics board members sat around a black conference table that reflected their faces back at them like a dark pond. No one looked calm. They looked expensive, tired, and predatory. Claire Halston stood at the head of the table with one hand on a leather folder and the other wrapped so tightly around a paper cup that the lid had bent inward. At 34, she had built the kind of composure people mistook for invincibility. That morning, it was only armor. "Say it plainly," one board member told her. "Was the asset destroyed or not?" Another asked. "Because if it wasn't," a third said, "we have exposure." I did not know any of this yet. Not while I stood in my salvage yard with grease on my hands and that engine hidden under a tarp. But this was the hour the story changed. Not because of the metal, because of the memory attached to it. Claire did not answer right away. Silence gathered around her, heavy and costly. Beyond the glass wall, heels clicked across marble, printer's word, phones chimed. Inside that room, all of it sounded far away. She opened the folder and slid out a photograph no one there expected to see. A faded shot of an older man in shop coveralls, smiling beside a stripped Porsche chassis in a cramped garage. Her father. "That car was never supposed to exist in any report," she said. The room shifted. One board member leaned back. Another stopped taking notes. The oldest among the 5 narrowed his eyes, not with sympathy, but with calculation. They knew corporate risk. They did not know grief. Years earlier, before the towers, before the private flights, before Claire Halston became a name that moved markets, there had been debt, lawsuits, and a father brilliant enough to build what others said could not be built. He had poured his final years into a prototype engine hidden inside that Porsche. Not a hobby, not a vanity project. A design with defense applications, energy implications, and patent questions ugly enough to ruin a public company if tied to the wrong chain of custody. When he died, Claire buried all of it. The blueprints, the records, the car. Or at least she thought she had. I sold it for scrap because it was the cleanest end, she said. Not coldly, tiredly. One board member pushed. You mean you concealed a potentially material asset? No, Claire said. I mean I refused to turn my father into a boardroom feeding frenzy. There it was. The personal wound under the corporate language. Then the county auction office called her assistant. The woman's voice came through speakerphone, shaky and too careful. There had been inquiries. 2 men had come in asking about the Porsche by lot number. Then another call had come from the buyer's side asking whether there had been any confusion in the sale. The vehicle, as far as anyone could confirm, had not been processed beyond recovery. Not destroyed. Still somewhere. Still reachable. The stillness that followed was worse than shouting. I have learned that wealthy people fear few things more than an object they thought dead returning with witnesses attached. One board member swore under his breath. Another immediately asked for legal containment. The oldest one asked the only question that mattered. Who bought it? The auction clerk gave them my name. Ethan Walker. Claire's expression changed then, and I wish I could tell you it was simple fear or simple anger, but it was neither. It was recognition of consequence. A single father and salvage yard mechanic now stood between her buried past and a corporate scandal worth millions. Worse than that, he stood between her and the last thing her father had touched with hope. She took the phone off speaker. Rain tapped the office windows hard enough to sound like knuckles. I was still standing by the workbench with grease on my hands when the black SUV rolled through the salvage yard gate like it had taken a wrong turn into a life it had never respected. By then, I already knew 2 things. Claire Halston had found my name, and whatever sat inside that Porsche mattered enough to drag a billionaire out into rust, mud, and chain-link fences. The yard smelled like wet metal and motor oil. Forklift beeps echoed from the far row. My 2 kids were inside the office with coloring books and grilled cheese, close enough for me to hear them laugh, and that laugh kept me steady. The SUV stopped 10 feet from the Porsche shell. The driver's door opened first. Not hers. A man in a dark coat stepped out, looked around like the dirt offended him, then moved aside. Claire Halston came next, heels sinking half an inch into the mud before she caught herself. Expensive coat. No umbrella. Face pale from whatever storm had started long before the weather. I wiped my hands on a rag and waited. Ethan Walker? One of the men asked. I didn't stutter when I gave the auction clerk my name. I said. Claire Halston looked past me at the stripped-down car, then back at me. I need to speak with you alone. No, I said. The men beside her stiffened. I pointed toward the office. My kids are inside. I'm not walking off with strangers, and I'm not leaving that car. For 1 second, something flashed across her face. Not offense. Adjustment. People like her were used to doors opening before they touched the handle. Mine stayed shut. Fine, Claire Halston said. Then we talk here. The wind pushed cold rain through the open bay. Somewhere above us, a loose sheet of tin rattled. She stepped closer to the Porsche, and I moved once, just enough to remind her whose property sat on my lot. I'm prepared to buy it back, she said. It already sold. I know that. Then you know the answer. One of the men opened a leather case. Inside sat papers and a cashier's check. The number was written in clean blue ink, more money than I had seen in one place outside hospital bills and lottery commercials. My stomach tightened. Not from greed. From math. Rent. School shoes. Brake job on the truck. The late electric notice folded in my pocket. Claire Halston watched me see it. Name your price, she said quietly. Today, that was the unequal part. Not the money itself. The assumption behind it. That every man had a number. That every hard season could be leveraged into obedience. I laid the rag down. Why? Her eyes cooled. It was my car. No, it was your car. Past tense. I nodded at the shell. You dumped it. I bought it legal. So I'll ask again. Why? She said nothing. Rainwater dripped off the roof and hit the concrete in a steady tick, tick, tick. The men with her shifted their weight. They wanted this done fast. Clean. Silent. I had lived long enough to know silence was where the truth usually hid. You came here yourself, I said. That means this isn't about sentiment. It is not your concern what it's about. It is if you want me to hand over something I own. Her jaw tightened. You have no idea what you're standing in the middle of. I looked at the gutted Porsche, then back at her. That makes two of us. That landed. Not loud. Just true. Claire Halston took a breath and dismissed the men with one glance. They stepped back toward the SUV, uneasy but obedient. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Less boardroom. More daughter. My father worked on that car before he died, she said. He left something in it. Something that cannot become public. I let the words hang there. They explained urgency, not value. What kind of something? I asked. I'm not answering that. Then I'm not selling. Dust drifted through the office light between us, slow as ash after a fire. Outside, I could hear a forklift backing up, its warning beep cutting through the yard, sharp and lonely. Claire Halston did not blink. I kept one hand on the greasy workbench behind me and the other near the folder I had built from scraps of evidence nobody expected a salvage mechanic to understand. Metal tags, shipping stamps, a partial serial plate hidden under carbon dust, receipts that did not belong in a junk sports car. You want trust, I said. Then start giving it. Claire Halston's jaw tightened. You have no idea what you're holding. That makes two of us. The room went quiet. I opened the folder. Not with drama. With care. There are moments when truth does not arrive like thunder. It arrives like paper laid flat on steel. Quiet. Final. Hard to deny. I turned the first page toward her. A high-resolution printout from a parts registry one of my old military customers had helped me access after hours. The engine number, once cleaned and fully traced, did not belong to a production Porsche at all. It matched a restricted prototype program buried under 3 shell suppliers and 1 defense-adjacent mobility contractor. Claire Halston leaned in. Then she stopped breathing for half a second. I saw it. The second page held valuation estimates. Not for a used engine. Not for a collector rebuild. For an experimental hybrid performance platform with defense applications, racing applications, and proprietary energy recovery systems that had never reached public release. Estimated program value. Just under $8 million. I let her read every line. No, she whispered. That was not denial. That was recognition. The fluorescent lights buzzed above us. Oil and old paper mixed in the air. Somewhere in the yard, one of my kids laughed. Then the sound vanished under the slam of a metal gate. It reminded me all at once what was at stake now. This was no longer about making payroll. No longer about whether I had found a rare machine inside a dead car. This had crossed into ownership, liability, and secrets with expensive bodyguards. Claire Halston put both palms on the desk. My father told the board the project was dead. Your board. Her eyes lifted to mine. 5 people. Halston Dynamics, board members. They approved the write-off years ago. If this engine still exists, then the accounting was false, the disposal was false, and whoever signed it is exposed. I felt the ground shift under the conversation. Not because I suddenly trusted her. Because I finally understood why men in tailored coats had shown up at a salvage yard offering cash with no inspection. Who's hunting it? I asked. She hesitated. Then, for the first time since she arrived, Claire Halston chose honesty over control. Possibly people inside my own company, she said. Possibly someone who helped bury it. If they know you found the car intact, they won't just argue price. They'll argue possession. Then they'll argue you tampered with corporate property. After that, they'll make you the leak. The words landed heavy. Reputation. Legal risk. My business. My children's home. All of it suddenly felt closer to a cliff than a future. I pulled the cereal plate from my pocket, wrapped in a shop rag, and set it on the desk between us. Her face changed. Not fear this time. Grief. My father hid it in there, she said, almost to herself. He knew the program was wrong. He must have stripped the identifiers before the disposal order went through. She swallowed. He wasn't protecting money. He was hiding proof. Proof of what? She looked at the pages again. I don't know yet. That answer, strange as it was, felt true. A phone started vibrating on the desk. Not mine. Hers. Claire Halston glanced at the screen, and all the color left her face. She turned it toward me. An unknown number had sent a photo taken from outside the chain-link fence. My office window. My workbench. My children in the yard. visible in the corner of the frame. The phone kept buzzing against the desk like a trapped insect, and for one long second all I could hear was the forklift outside, backing up in slow, merciless beeps. The photo on Claire Halston's screen was clear enough to turn my stomach. My office window, my workbench, my children near the fence line, half hidden by a stack of dented fenders. That was taken today, I said. I know. You're being watched. Her jaw tightened. No, we're being watched. That landed harder than I expected. The office smelled like hot dust and old paper. A loose pane in the window rattled when the wind shifted. Between us, the engine documents sat under my grease-stained hand like something alive. Until then, I had still been thinking like a mechanic under pressure. Move the car. Sell the car. Take the money. Keep my children safe. Simple math. But simple math breaks down when the thing in your yard can put a target on your family and expose something rotten inside a billion-dollar company at the same time. I looked back at the photo. If I sell fast, whoever sent that just buys silence cheap. Claire didn't answer right away. That silence told me more than any speech could have. Then she pulled in a slow breath and did something I had not expected from her. She set the phone down, took off the tailored jacket that made her look untouchable, and folded it over the back of the chair as if she was preparing for a fight she could not delegate. The engine number in those papers, she said, matches a restricted project code from Halston Dynamics. Her voice had gone lower, flatter. That project was reported dead 18 months ago. You think somebody lied. I think somebody buried $8 million inside a junk car and made sure the paperwork disappeared. She met my eyes. And if that's true, the fraud is inside my company. The room went still. I had spent years around twisted metal. You learn fast that damage is rarely where it first shows. Then why would the car end up here? Her expression shifted, not softer exactly, but more honest. Because I sold it in anger. Because I wanted one chapter of my life gone. Because I didn't think anyone would ever look beneath the shell. That was the first clean truth she had given me. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and took out the tin box where I kept cash for payroll emergencies, school fees, and parts runs. Not much. Never enough. I slid it deeper out of sight, then reached for my shop keys. What are you doing? Claire asked. Changing the board. I stood. Nobody touches that Porsche. Not buyers, not your people, not mine. You're trusting me very quickly. I gave a short, humorless laugh. I'm not trusting you. I'm deciding the car matters more unsold than sold. That difference seemed to register. Outside, the air smelled of diesel, wet gravel, and sun-baked rubber. A gull cried overhead. My children were no longer by the fence, and the relief that hit me almost buckled my knees. I spotted them near the far bay with their headphones on, arguing over a broken radio, safe for the moment. Claire followed me across the yard in heels that sank into the mud until she finally stopped, muttered something under her breath, and kicked them off. Barefoot on gravel, Billionaire and bruised pride, she kept pace anyway. I noticed that. I did not comment. I locked the outer gate myself, then moved the Porsche into Bay 3, the only stall without a direct sight line from the road. Claire stood watch by the half-closed door, phone in hand, scanning every passing truck. Call the police, I said. I can't. Not yet. I turned off the engine lift and faced her. That's not good enough. If I call too early, 5 Halston Dynamics board members will hear about it before any detective does. Her voice sharpened. If one of them is involved, evidence vanishes by dinner. That changed the shape of the danger. Rain tapped the corrugated roof hard enough to sound like knuckles. The salvage yard, which had always felt like a place where broken things came to rest, suddenly felt like a place being watched. I stood beside the stripped Porsche shell with grease still drying on my hands, and Claire lowered her phone as if even the screen glow might betray us. If the board learns first, she said, they bury this. And if we stay quiet, they come for you before they come for me. That landed deeper than I wanted it to. Until then, I had been thinking about the engine, the missing pieces, the men on the road, the cold weight of a machine worth more than any house I would ever own. But that was mechanical danger. This was social danger. Legal danger. The kind that walked in wearing a smile and left with your children's future in a file folder. I looked through the office window toward the small lamp I kept on for Ethan Walker's children when they waited up for me. Their backpacks were still on the chair from school. One lunchbox sat open. A sock hung halfway out of a duffel bag. Ordinary things. Holy things. The kind you notice most when you feel the world leaning toward them. Claire saw where my eyes went. Her voice softened, but only for a second. They'll say you concealed stolen property. They'll say you tampered with evidence. If someone pushes hard enough, they'll ask whether a salvage yard mechanic is a stable home for 2 kids. I didn't answer right away. The fluorescent light buzzed over us. Motor oil and wet dirt filled the air. My old work jacket, hanging from a nail by the door, looked suddenly less like clothing and more like testimony against me. I had spent years building a life that looked plain from the outside and sturdy from the inside. Early school drop-offs, paid invoices, dinner at the same table, soccer cleats by the back step. Nothing glamorous, just quiet, just dignity. And now a car I did not ask for had opened a door for men with money to step through. Then Claire did something I had not expected. She reached into her coat, pulled out her phone again, and set it on my workbench. I'm going public first. I stared at her. You just said not to call. I'm not calling the police dispatch line first. Her jaw tightened. I'm calling the company's outside counsel, the independent audit chair, and one financial reporter I trust. If I create a time-stamped record outside Halston Dynamics, the board can't smother it quietly. That was the moment the balance shifted. Not solved. Not safe. But shifted. She moved fast. 3 calls. Short sentences. No wasted breath. She stated that a former company vehicle tied to a private asset disposal contained undisclosed value and possible evidence of internal fraud. She requested immediate document preservation. She named no engine details. Not yet. Smart enough to protect the proof. Bold enough to make silence expensive. By the time she finished, my phone was vibrating on the bench. Unknown number. I answered, and a polished male voice introduced himself as an attorney representing concerned business interests. He said there had been misunderstandings about the Porsche. He said I was being advised not to remove, disclose, or discuss any components. Then he mentioned my yard's permit status, my insurance exposure, and a review of my home environment should law enforcement find irregularities. Not a direct threat. Worse, a civilized one. I let him finish. Then I said, if you have something to say, put it in writing. Silence. Then the line clicked dead. Claire had heard enough from my face alone. They moved faster than I thought. They mentioned my kids. For the first time since she had walked into my yard, the untouchable polish fell off her completely. She looked not like a billionaire CEO, but like a woman standing in the wreckage of an identity she had worn too long. They'll come after the part of us that bends, she said quietly. The threat hung in the air like burned metal and hot wire, sharp enough to taste. Rain tapped the office window of my salvage yard in uneven little bursts, and somewhere outside, a forklift beeped twice before going still. Claire stood across from me with both hands braced against my scarred wooden desk, her jaw tight, her breathing measured, as if calm itself had become an act of discipline. They won't stop with pressure, I said. I know. They'll bury this if we let them. For one long second, neither of us moved. The old desk lamp hummed. The scent of motor oil and wet dirt drifted through the cracked window. Then something changed in her face. Not fear. Decision. They want us quiet, Claire said. So let's make silence impossible. That was the first honest strategy that felt bigger than defense. Up to that point, I had been protecting the engine, protecting my kids, protecting whatever thin line still existed between trouble and disaster. But Claire stopped thinking like prey. She started thinking like someone willing to set fire to the lie that built her whole world. Within an hour, we were moving. Not hiding it. Moving it. The engine sat under a gray tarp in Bay 3, its shape compact and harmless looking to anyone who did not know what it was. But now I knew too much. The custom casing. The internal stamp half ground away. The impossible serial trail that connected it to a classified prototype program and an off-book sale that should never have happened. $8 million of engineering, hidden inside the wreckage of a car Claire had signed away as scrap during the ugliest week of her life. She had made that reckless choice. Now she was going to say it where everyone could hear. Claire made one call to Halston Dynamics headquarters and another to all 5 board members. No pleasantries. No excuses. She ordered an emergency public compliance review at the company's downtown innovation gallery, the one place the board loved because glass walls made everything look transparent. She told them she had discovered evidence tied to asset diversion, fraudulent disposal, and internal concealment. She told them if a single person failed to appear, she would turn everything over directly to federal investigators. They'll think you're bluffing, I said as I chained the engine crate into the back of my flatbed. She looked at me while fastening her coat in the rain. Then tonight will be educational. Downtown, the gallery glowed white and cold against the storm. The polished concrete smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Cameras from 2 local business outlets had already arrived, tipped off by Claire herself. That was her move, not mine. In the yard, I knew how to strip a transmission and red damage by touch. In that building, she knew exactly where reputations bled. The 5 board members were waiting when we rolled the crate inside. Shock first, then anger, then the fast, ugly stillness of people recognizing the shape of exposure. One of them stepped forward and tried to shut it down with corporate language, talking about procedure, chain of custody, private review. Claire cut him off so cleanly, it was almost gentle. No, she said. Private is how this happened. The room quieted. I unlatched the crate. Metal clicked. Wood groaned. When I pulled the panel free, the engine sat there under the gallery lights like a heart dragged into court. A murmur swept the room. Claire did not look away from it. I approved the disposal of the Porsche, she said, voice steady. I signed it off without inspection because I wanted one chapter of my life erased fast. That was negligence. Mine. But after that, this company concealed what was inside that vehicle, altered records, and used my signature as cover. One board member actually laughed. It died when Claire dropped the printed transfer logs on the table. I laid down the photographs next. The ground serial marks. The casing modifications. The internal code plate I had found tucked beneath the heat shield. The laugh vanished so fast it seemed ashamed of itself. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A faint scent of burnt coffee hung above the polished boardroom table. Claire Halston did not sit down. One of the 5 board members pushed the transfer logs aside with 2 fingers. Even if the records were altered, that doesn't prove value. Claire turned. Calm now. Too calm. Then let's stop guessing. She slid a black key fob across the table to Ethan Walker. Every eye in the room followed it. He understood before anyone else did. Quiet had its own sound. Ethan picked up the fob, the plastic still cold from Claire's hand, and reached for the hard case beside his chair. Inside lay the code plate, the heat shield, and the engine data he had protected when everyone else wanted him bought, rushed, or erased. His hands were rough with grease lines that no amount of soap ever fully removed. They looked out of place against walnut and glass. Yet in that room, they were the only honest hands anyone trusted. The vehicle was sold for scrap, Claire said. For $2,000. Under my authority. But the engine inside, it was a Halston Dynamics prototype tied to our abandoned endurance program. The valuation on the patents, power density architecture, and defense-adjacent thermal system now stands at just over $8 million. A chair scraped back. Another board member stood. You're saying a junk Porsche was carrying company property worth $8 million? No, Claire said, her voice low and precise. I'm saying Ethan Walker found what this company tried not to see. That landed harder than anger ever could. Ethan opened the case and set each piece on the table with the care of a man laying down proof at church. The casing modifications matched the archived design drawings. The ground serial marks matched the altered inventory logs. The hidden plate carried the internal code no salvage worker should have ever known to look for unless he had done what Ethan did best. Pay attention when everyone else rushed. One board member started to speak. Claire cut him off. No, just that. No. Then she reached into her folder and placed one more document in the center of the table, a signed declaration transferring full finder's compensation, legal protection, and a permanent consulting contract to Ethan. Beneath it sat a second page authorizing a trust for Ethan Walker's children, funded from her own executive equity payout after her resignation package was voided. The room stilled, not because of the money, because she had chosen consequences. Ethan looked at the pages, but not greedily. He looked like a father checking whether a door was real before letting his children walk through it. You don't owe me charity. Claire met his eyes. This isn't charity. It's correction. Grace, when it is real, never sounds soft. It sounds exact. The oldest board member cleared his throat. Claire Halston, are you formally admitting negligence and internal concealment before this board? I am, she said, and I am naming every executive decision that followed. No one interrupted after that. The vote came 20 minutes later. Internal counsel would refer the altered records for criminal review. The executives involved would be removed pending investigation. Ethan's fine would be recognized in the official valuation filing. His rights to compensation would be protected in writing before close of business. Justice did not shout. It signed its name. By dusk, the salvage yard smelled of rain on rust and cut metal. A freight truck from Halston Dynamics rolled through the gate, not to seize, but to return. Crated equipment, new lifts, diagnostic tools Ethan had only seen in trade magazines. The consulting agreement had already cleared. The trust for Ethan Walker's children had been funded. For the first time in years, his future did not depend on what broke next. His two children ran out from the office when they saw him step from his truck. Ethan knelt and held them both, eyes closed, breathing them in like a man who had been underwater too long.